All right, just a little housekeeping. If any guest is wearing those translator devices, please make sure once we has concluded today's afternoon session, please return to our friendly staff member at the way of the exit. Okay, so I guess we now will be having Australia-China Future Forum, the actual forum to kick off now. So we'll be divided into a couple of different panelist sessions. So the first session will be on the 5-year chapter, Finance and Technology. So the first round will be having our panelists on stage, the Honorable Andrew Robb, AO, the Honorable Dr. Helen Shan Ho, OAM, Dr. Jim Harrowell, AM, and Mr. Jimmy Ye from ACY Securities, and Mr. Haoshen Liu Hassan from Huawei.
Or shall I start? I think we have spoken a lot about the future of our economic relation. Now we have a couple of our sponsors who will be able to tell us more about their business, how good it is. Of course, Jimmy, ACY Security, and Hassan.
Hassan from Huawei, very famous company here.
Well, famous enough.
I think maybe they should introduce themselves a bit more because so that you understand their background. I'll pass it on. Jimmy, you want to say something first?
Well, I think the focus of this panel is on the finance sector, and the finance sector is one of the exciting opportunities for Australia and China. Over the last 20 years, we've seen the major Chinese banks all establish themselves here in New South Wales, providing access to capital, not just for Australian companies. We've seen technology companies such as Huawei and a number of others establish themselves in Australia, so that we have an opportunity to participate in leading-edge technology. So I suppose I might just ask Hudson a question to start with.
Yep.
What do you see the opportunities are for Australia in the technology area? Clearly, connectivity is the biggest issue globally at the moment. So what's your take on that, Hudson?
Yeah, probably I think I can share one of my story just that happened. So I have a LinkedIn account. So when I arrived in Australia half years ago, I proactively to post some Huawei news because I want more people to understand what's happened on Huawei. And last Monday is the 11th November, so it's the anniversary for the First World War ending. But in China, the 11th November is the Singles Day, so which is a festival for online shopping. And on that day, so Alibaba platform sell out $38 billion products on that day. So I just posted one simple sentence on my LinkedIn: "Stop war and let us trade," which this sentence got viewed and liked for more than 5,000 times, which break my personal record. So I believe, so most of the people think that the trade can bring the prosperity for the society. So when the trade going, so the war stop. When the trade stop, the war began. So I prefer to have a trade. And Huawei is the global leading company for technologies. We operated in more than 170 countries, which make Huawei as a global players in the world. So we are the beneficial owner of the trade, for the free trade. So we really support the free trade agreement, no matter between China with other countries or with Australia. So that we do support this free trade agreement. But we also suffering the situations here. So we have to admit that there is always not good things, but we are facing challenges. So now we operate, Huawei operated in Australia for 15 years. In Australia, in New South Wales, we set up 15 years ago, we used to have a 700 employee, but right now we only have a 500. We comply all the policies, all the law, all the regulations in Australia. But now we are banned without any clear, transparent, fair regulations. We want to ask why, but nobody tell us why. So that is a problem. And Australia will miss out because of the 5G. So what I want to emphasize is Australians have to admit that more and more innovation will come from China. Simply ban the technologies from China cannot make you safe. So you need to have a clear, transparent, fair regulations to open to the China, and then they will have more investment and companies come to Australia. And regarding the questions that you mentioned, that for the future, 5G is the foundation for all the vertical industry. No matter it's a finance, manufacturing, agriculture, mining, so they need to go to digital transformation. And the 5G is the foundation. But right now, you are lack of the leading technologies, you are lack of competitions. That is the risk right now I foresee. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Hassan. Jimmy? Yes.
Could I add something on the Huawei, if
Sure.
you don't mind, before we move on to the next? About 10 years ago, I went with 2 or 3 other people to China, looking at what was happening, and we went to the Huawei precinct in Shenzhen, and it was such an eye-opener to me. This is 10 years ago, when a lot's happened in 10 years, but even at that stage, there was a campus with 65,000 young engineers doing research and development on product at Shenzhen. So I followed the company from then on, because they were starting to get involved in Australia, and now I understand the 65,000 has grown to a global research and development team of, you'll correct me if I got it wrong, but something in excess of 130,000 young engineers. Now, I must say, you know, I've mentioned that I've been back to China many times trying to encourage business activity. What I have found is that business in China is consumed with the importance of research and development, and the innovation, sense of innovation, and Huawei leads the pack with this, because it's now first or second in every part of the supply chain, from mobile phones all the way up to the most complicated satellites that you can come across. And it's because they've put in the effort, and they've got such a critical mass of people that are working on innovation. So I wanted to congratulate the company, but to say it's not just Huawei. I'm finding that attitude that if you do team up with a Chinese company, if you do make an investment, a joint investment, you do a joint venture or whatever, you accept their investment here, I can assure you that the importance of R&D is paramount across companies in China, and it's been a very big factor in the success in the last 10 or 20 years at least. Thanks.
Thank you, Andrew. May I just add too? I think Huawei 5G, I'm really looking forward. I'm quite optimistic it will come because it's so important. I'll tell you very quickly, a very personal encounter when I was in Shanghai. I was paying money for the goods I bought. They wouldn't take it because I can't use cash. So I give them my credit card, which I seldom use overseas. They wouldn't take it either. They actually wanted my WeChat. I don't have WeChat linked up to my bank account. Just as well, my girlfriend who came with me actually have this WeChat in the phone. So she paid for it through the WeChat. Now, this is kind of technology I haven't even encountered all my life. That was first time, and that was only just in April. So this is kind of technology that Australia is far, far behind. Well, can I just ask Jimmy to start?
So basically, from my view, basically as a technology company, and technologies, well, it's a tool for efficiency. Basically, that's what it means. So ACY Securities, we are a finance company. We also having a, 50% of our employees are developers. They are, actually do innovations in terms of clearing and executions. That's what we do. And the good thing about the industry is that as a licensee from ASIC point of view, they've got a thing called Innovation Hub. Okay, it was introduced, I think, within 10 years to encourage innovations, where if technology companies who actually innovate within the field of finance, and if they have encountered any regulation, obstacles, or encounter any regulations that require help from the regulators like ASIC, we can actually, jump in and put an application form, ask for regulators to help, which that's what been provided to technology companies to, ACY Securities like us. Whereas in terms of infrastructures like Huawei, I would expect that there should be something very similar to be introduced, where if any technologies that improve the efficiencies that is, facing regulatory issues, there should be someone to step out and to deal with it in order for companies like Huawei to continue to move on. Yeah.
Just on the finance side, it's a question really for Andrew. The establishment of the RMB hub in Sydney was something which got a bit of quite good publicity at the early stages. But if you got a comment generally, I see the benefit of having the Chinese banks here engaging with Australian banks can only smooth out the financial side of trade and investment. What's your thoughts, Andrew?
Yes, well, I've had a fair bit of contact now with banks in both countries with the ambition of trading directly in RMB. Right? So it's another step, even if you... there's one thing about having banks physically in the country, but what we need is that seamless exchange. The thing is, if we don't have to take everything back through US currency, we save 3% on every deal across the country. You can imagine with $230 billion worth of trade going on between us, if you could take 3% off just because you're trading in RMB and you don't have to go back through the US dollar. So these are the sorts of things which having a presence of Chinese banks here and Australian banks in China, it's led to serious focus on these sorts of issues. And again, you start to do things that we do best, and they do what they do best, and that whole theory starts to work for us. But it's all, it's competitiveness is not one big thing. It's a whole series of initiatives that you need to take, and getting the banks together, which is what I think you were implying. It creates more capital that's available. Capital has got different ambition depending on which bank it is, what their potential for risk is, what their priorities might be, where their levels of expertise are. So the more competition we've got, the better price we'll get as well. Okay, so there's it's just a further extension of the theory that if you open up in every possible dimension. I know with the free trade agreement, we used to be able to only buy 20% of a bank in China, and then the free trade agreement took that to 49%. So a very material difference in terms of the influence that the shareholders would have on a business. And so these are all important steps along the chain of becoming far more seamless in our interaction at a commercial level.
Thanks, Andrew. I mean, the other issue with the exchange issue, currency exchange, and this comes from a briefing that was given to Premier O'Farrell when he was in China, talking about large-scale infrastructure contracts to buy rolling stock, for instance, for New South Wales Railways, that the capacity to do the contract in RMB meant that the Chinese side, the manufacturer, could actually fix the price and come up with a much more competitive price because they didn't have to hedge the currency risk. They knew what the raw materials would cost, they knew what the labour cost was, and if New South Wales was prepared to do the contract in RMB, it takes, quite aside from the exchange differences if you're going through US, it actually enables the Chinese party to come up with a much more competitive price. In fact, the analyst from HSBC said you should be looking at a price saving of something, I think in those days, and interest rates have changed now very much, but between 14 and 18%. And it could be very substantial, particularly on a long-term contract where you're delivering over a number of years.
I was just given the signal that we might have closed off. I think if you have any comment, this will be the last comment. We have to close off this panel then. Okay. I think...
Thank you. Thank you very much to Mr. Jimmy He from ACY Securities and Mr. Haoshen Liu. May I ask you to return to your seats? We'll be beginning the next panel discussion, which is on the 5 years chapter on the import and export and healthcare. So for this panel discussion, I would like to welcome Ms. Wendy Mao from Swang Group and Ms. Diana Tipping from Export Council.
We have